challenge was maybe the sheer size of dealing with that Queen puppet. I mean, we went on and did all these Jurassic movies where they are even bigger and more complicated and blah, blah, blah. But at that point in time, that really seemed pretty monumental.
Yeah.
There was no conversation to involve H.R. Giger. He had already designed the core creatures from the original Alien. The only thing that wasn't designed from Alien was the Queen Alien. Jim had designed that.
Stan and Jim sort of sequestered themselves off, and they tried different approaches to how to put people inside suits, facing the wrong direction so that the knee joints operated backwards, two guys back to back, one guy laying on his chest, one guy laying on his back, and they literally had a design battle going back and forth, trying to not one-up each other, but to advance each other's ideas, take the good points and run with it.
The coolest thing was to go to the first full-scale mock-up just to get an idea of the size of it, and that was done with the quickest techniques ever of just grabbing foam rubber, painting some of it, wrapping the rest of it in black polypropylene garbage bags. There were a big pair of these monster hands that Stan had been developing for another film that were reproduced in foam rubber. And we had two stuntmen come over, and they were hung from a crane, and we wrapped them all up and added legs and big puppeteering rods on those legs, and we shot video and stills of that test. And the idea there was to see what the total mobility was of this thing.
Crane, raise up. All right, bob the crane up and down. Just bob it up and down. Not so much, just a little bit, like it's shifting its weight. Okay, try to keep them palms down. There we go. Okay, spread the arms out as wide as you can go. Fix the space there. Okay, pivot.
Two men hanging from a crane, each of them with their arms, big long extensions, legs that were operated by control rods. And the result was, I mean, you look at it and it is what it is. It's cut foam and it's plastic trash bags, but it made an impression. It definitely made an impression and showed that it was the size, the relationship, and the technique was going to work.
Okay, that's a cut.
That was as far as we took it here in the States. And when we got to London and set up shop over there, that's when the final work on the full-size Queen began, which started with measurements, life casts, sculptures, and all of that.
The whole thing with the Queen Alien was, that was a new, really huge creature, big experience for us. So I can't remember before that was done. Not a whole lot of animatronic effects have been done to that scale up to that time.
Maybe Dragon Slayer had some elements that were close, but not to that high action of
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, some big hydraulic tentacles.
Most of the work that we did with the Queen was with the one hero puppet, but we had different configurations. Sometimes we could take the legs off, and we could attach her at the end of a boom arm to be able to manipulate her and move her around. The head control was hydraulic, which at the time I thought that was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, because it was the first time I was ever connected with hydraulics. And as simple as it was at the time, it was very effective. We had hydraulic lines that ran from the neck controls to a little support stand, and literally had steering wheels on it to crank the Queen's head around, and that whole process was new and exciting to see on something of that size.
This was something that hasn't been done in a movie and in a film before, so it was a major challenge to us. It was only the bizarre, insane thinking and imagination of Jim that would even attempt to try something like that on film. And when he came to me about it, first inclination is, well, this is crazy. A split second later, in my own head, I'm going, but this is also Jim Cameron, and I've worked with Jim before, and I've worked with him since. If Jim is imagining it, somewhere in his head, he's got a feeling and he's got an idea of how it can happen, how he can make it happen. So my second thought would be, yeah, we can do that. Can you push your right arm, Malcolm, in a little further? That's it. It was months of research and development to come up with a prototype which is all we ever come up with in this industry, that had to walk out on the set and be dynamic and take direction from Jim Cameron. And I think probably the Queen Alien is the only actress that ever could take direction from Jim Cameron and get pissed back and back him off. Now let it drop all the way down to your side and then push the hand forward. Just like this.
There you go.
There you go.
And bending at the wrist bending this way at the wrist as much as possible looks good too. There we go. That's it. That's it. Now slower than that. There we go. Right. Even slower than that. And don't just rhythmically go up and down, but kind of vary it. You can do one all the way down and then come up and then just bob in here a little bit like that. You see what I mean? Okay? I think the best way to do it is to take this first. Okay, how long?
We can do the rehearsal. Is there any reason why we can't do the rehearsal right now? The Queen is supported on a crane arm. Her body, tilt and turn, is hydraulically controlled. Her legs are puppeted externally by puppeteers, rods, etc., that will move her legs.
And on action, slowly bring it down.
Her neck is hydraulically controlled. Her head, the tilt of her head, the turn of her head, the cock of her head, all hydraulically controlled.
And action!
Her face, which sits in the front of her head, is operated by cables, and that has complete movement all the way around. Her lips are cably controlled, and her jaw is cably controlled, and her tongue will be cably controlled.
And cut!
Johnny Boys, can we clear now now for rehearsal, please? I want everybody out now, babe.
All right. And action!
At any one time, to move the Queen can take up to 14, 15, and possibly 16 operators.
And cut!
It's the most complicated piece of construction I've ever done. And I must say, since today was the first time we put her on film, I'm quite pleased at how well she came out. It's been quite a scary job, and hopefully it'll be as scary for the audience as it's been for us to create her.
Drop the elbow and raise the hand.
Hold on to their arms until the last minute. Until the last minute, John. Give them some.
Now, what's happening, guys? We've already got the boards on, right? So the minute I roll the camera, just go then, because there's no board going on, okay? Okay, here we go.
All right. Everybody listen for your action from Jim.
This is mute. No clap. Here we go, and roll! Camera! Start the effects.
Action!
She was huge, she weighed a lot, and to choreograph the movements of the Queen with the two people who were creating her movements was always a challenge and did eat up quite a bit of production time. On the other hand, we got every shot that we needed within our shooting schedule, which remained on budget and on schedule.
To Jim's credit, he knew how to shoot that 14-foot puppet that had a huge crane behind it and a big C bracket that was on a gimbal of sorts, and you never see it in the film. There was no digital rod removal, no wire removal. It's all framed in his mind carefully.
Being in this business for 20-something years now, it's interesting to look back and think about. There'd be no cut, plate, move on. I mean, you had to do every single shot. It was all done the hard way in the camera. There was no cleanup afterwards. It had to happen right there.
The actual Queen's tail piercing Lance's chest, which was meant to look like a false chest bursting effect just to throw the audience off, was a flattened piece of plastic tubing up against Lance's chest with a foam copy of the Queen's tail in a very, very soft foam latex that was dressed basically down his pant leg. And they had a very, very thin wire that you just didn't see because of how busy the background was. And something that we found out a long time ago is that foam latex, when wet, becomes almost gossamer. It becomes extremely flexible and extremely compressible. So we were able to yank that tailpiece through a very, very skinny tube, so you just didn't see it under the wardrobe.
The only problem I had was that they had milk and yogurt mixed up, and they had it sitting in cups, you know, for me to puke all over the place. And the stuff went bad, and man, boy, did I get sick. I mean, I had like food poisoning from it. It was like, but I couldn't stop the shooting. I mean, I'd go home and spend the whole night up, and come in the next day and shoot some more. But they changed it. Once they knew I got sick, they made it fresh.
The Queen's tail was already pre-attached to a harness point on his back, so that was already there. The Queen was actually standing there in the shot before you even see her.
It's a reveal, I think. But that baffles people to no end, that effect. I think John Richardson's team as well, who was the physical floor effects, helped rig things with us that were of that sort of nature that required big physics, you know, because we were kind of like, gee.
They had a full body makeup of me. I mean, they literally made me from toe to top of my head.
The Bishop puppet itself was hung straight up into the rafters from the shoulders. There was a twist lock mechanism in the waist that, when centered, was locked. When twisted about 90 degrees, would come undone.
That's right. It's actually wires.
The bottom hand was around the far hip, and the top hand was around the far shoulder, and they were attached on wires so that when those wires were pulled, that would cause the untwisting activity. The two pieces would separate. You'd then have to let go of the wire from the rafters, and the wires that were at the two different fingertips would continue the action and pull it away from the Queen.
And we had milk tubes.
Milk and
things,
yogurt.
right? So the whole thing would spray all of that.
Jim needed a shot of the top torso of Lance landing to see what happened, is the classic shot. And they had Stan and the guys made this thing, and I believe it was Alec Gillis was tossing this puppet, you know, so he'd throw it and it would land like this upside, and it was hilarious. And I don't know where that footage is, if he could find that. You know, Alec would, they'd try to, you know, put some goop on it so it would slide and so forth. You know, it would land in every goofy imaginable way. And they finally found an angle, but it was hilarious watching it, because he's got this rubber torso when you see him handling it, because it just looks, it's just one of those funny moments. There weren't a lot of funny moments on that film.
So real. The makeup would come in and do a little makeup on it, on Stan's work. And then hair was supposed to come in and do my hair. But they asked makeup to do it, and they said, no, we have to get hair to do it. And I said, no, I'm gonna do it myself. So I ran my fingers through, that's all it took, right? But when I walked into the room on this thing, I thought it was the creepiest moment of my life, because here I'm looking at myself, and it was identical. I mean, some guy owns it in Hollywood. I haven't gone to visit it. The other thing was that they wanted to make animatronic half piece to go across the floor, and I said, Jim, you just put those little wires on the wrists and make it bounce, and I'll just imitate that, so it'll be seamless again. And that's what we did, and it worked.
I was particularly proud of being involved in the sequence with the Alien Queen and the Power Loader, because right from the start, my involvement on the movie, we had pictures drawn by Jim of which today you get computer-generated images done on a computer, but this is hand-drawn by Jim, of the power loader fighting the alien queen.
Jim was, because he's a talented designer and artist, he designed the power loader, and he would start with I remember, an arm, and he'd draw that and give this to John Richardson, who was the physical effects supervisor, and John was going to build the full-size one.
The power loader was, I think, certainly our most challenging thing on the movie. It was a tremendously difficult thing to conceptually, work out, design and build in, I think we did it in 3 months. We decided to build a stuntman inside it to help control some of the functions of it and to help it move, so that when Sigourney was in it, she was actually standing with her back right up against the stuntman, so that his movements would be transferred to her or vice versa. To help him stand in that situation, we had 2 different methods of supporting him. One was with wires from the sort of shoulder area, which we hid with radio aerials, or the other method was with a pole arm through the back, which was built on or it was attached to a specially built crane that was counterweighted, so that we could take all the weight, but he still had enough control over it because of the counterweight mechanism. Jim is a very hands-on director, and what makes it a little bit difficult for, I think, any effects man is Jim knows as much about it as we do. The problems tended to come when we started to actually build things, and particularly with a power loader. I mean, we'd be trying to cut as many corners as we can just to get it ready in time. But Jim would suddenly get locked in on the shape of the screw head in the back corner of the heel of the boot, and we were just screaming to get the thing ready. So from that point of view, I think we had some interesting times. I mean, certainly for a month or so. I seem to remember once or twice on a Friday night, a bottle of champagne would turn up in the workshop with a little note from Jim saying, "Building power loaders is thirsty work, have one on me," and it sort of smoothed everything out until we started again Monday. But they were good times.
Do you have to be pretty careful about security? I mean, closed set.
What closed set? I don't see a closed set. You can't come in here. Back. There's a closed set.
Everyone's a comedian.
Sorry, I can't have it. I'm behind the camera all the time. I don't get to have any fun. Cut. Let's try it again. When you reach for the control, make the whole action a little slower, like you're sort of settling into it. Just sort of like that. See what I mean? Yeah, let's pull back. Okay, stop there. Peter, why did you move that back? No. Put it back in. I didn't ask for that to be moved. Roll camera. You ready, David?
Okay, yeah. Speed.
And action, Nigel.
It always stuck in my mind, and it still does today, the sequence when we actually shot it on stage at Pinewood of the power loader we built, and seeing the alien queen that Stan Winston had built fighting. And it was just what Jim had drawn some 18 months, maybe 2 years previously.
Well, we had some interesting rehearsals for that, where the whole thing would tip over, because there was a big, strong guy named John who was in the, whatever that thing was behind me, and it was John who, I think, made the legs move and the arms move. And we had to have these rehearsals during lunch where we would try to go faster and faster, and we almost fell right on our faces a couple of times there. Luckily, we didn't really have to do that in the movie, but it was interesting to rehearse it. I loved that. You know, and that's, I think, one of the favorite moments people have is that battle. Get away from her, you bitch.
Get away from her, you bitch!
There was one instance where we, unbeknownst to anyone, strapped a balloon to Sigourney's saddle connected to an air pipe. So whenever she sat on the saddle, we could pump the balloon up, and she was wondering what the hell John was doing behind her with this movement going on from the saddle.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm not sure who, I guess it was John, the guy in back, who blew up this balloon behind me in a certain area while we were shooting one of the big scenes. And I remember going, what's happening back there?
She thought he was getting a boner all the time. She go, John, what are you doing, John? Because she couldn't move because she's strapped in. And he didn't know because he was nowhere to be seen because he was behind all this black. So as soon as she sat on it, John, what the fuck's going on? So.
I think he told me, but it was very funny because it lasted quite a long time, a couple of hours. I was thinking, well, this is interesting.
You know, one of the things I've always tried to do in my career is do things in camera as much as possible, and I think if you can do it whenever possible, you know, it's not always possible and it's not always right, but if it is right, then do it that way because it'll certainly look better at the end of the day. And you know, the whole thing came together and worked very pleasingly well, I seem to remember.